Welcome to today's session on the buying experience. Specifically, we're going to talk about whether yours is built on instinct or insight. And we're going to show how B2C tools like journey mapping can inform a more customer-centric B2B digital experience. My name's John Hours. I'm the CEO at Paragon. We're a web experience firm located in Cleveland, Ohio. We have over 1,000 customer interviews to our credit over many, many years for top B2B companies like Dow Chemical and Lockheed Martin. And most of this presentation is informed by that experience. If you want to read more about Paragon's story and some of our other experience, take a look at our website, paragon-inc.com. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about you. Who are you? First of all, you are definitely a B2C customer, especially since coronavirus. You do your research online, you're influenced by your friends on social media. You ultimately make informed decisions fairly quickly on what you're going to buy, and you know exactly where you're going to buy it. Now, you are probably not a B2B customer, a B2B buyer. If you are, you're probably not the sole decision maker. And even if you are, you almost certainly do not buy what you sell. Most of you doing marketing for a ceramic coatings company likely don't buy ceramic coatings. So what does this mean? This means that if we're in a B2C business and we sit down to imagine what an effective B2C campaign looks like, we can rely on our own experience, on what we do when we're purchasing products. If we're designing a B2B experience, we probably can't do this based on our own instinct. We just don't have the experience. And even if we do, our experience might be somewhat unique compared to our peers and other people who are buying. So how do we deal with that? We've put together a maturity model, a typical maturity model, to describe the B2B marketing maturity flow, what we see in our customers. And we see that most customers that are immature in this area start by marketing to businesses. And everybody does this to some extent. And when I say marketing to business, you basically say, this is what my business is. What do? We make the best ball bearings. What do? We have top ISO 9000 quality controls. What do? We have experience building valves for the space shuttle. And this is straightforward marketing to business. It requires the customer to look at what you offer and decide to sort of self-select into whether they do or don't need what you have. Do I need the best ball bearings, or are other ball bearings okay? Or does the space shuttle really apply to my project? And so forth. As we move up that maturity model a little bit, we start to talk about marketing to people. And often what we see here is customers that will personify their own company and personify the customer's company. And they'll go out and say, we will make your product better. We will make your service better. We will make your product more buyable, right? It's a stage along the way, and usually it's a stop off before customers get to the point of marketing to audiences. And marketing to audiences should be familiar to most of you, probably is. And most companies, most B2B companies we see stop here. They identify who their audiences are. They understand that they have some engagement with product engineers, and they have some engagement with their distributors, and they have some engagement perhaps even with their end customers in warranty matters and so forth. And they stop at the point of identifying these audiences. The case I want to make to you today is that we need to go one step further and start to market to the personas inside of those audiences. So what do I mean by a persona? Okay, a persona is somebody, really anybody in that audience, who owns a defined part of the buying process. And these people are all over the place. And depending what you're selling and depending on who you're selling to, you'll find different personas engaging with you in different ways. And the reason for that is that the B2B buying journey is complex and it's structured. And it's often structured uniquely by the customer you're dealing with. And this is really the fundamental difference between B2B and B2C marketing. We will often see multiple actors, multiple personas in a single customer, and we're not usually sure how they're going to engage, who's going to convert, and when they're going to convert. Okay? The person we're dealing with could be a buyer, they could be an influencer. There's some part of this buying process, we just don't know which part. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure we know when these people are coming and engage them at the moment they want to participate, at the moment they're going to act. If we take a look at the graphic I have on the screen right now, this is drawn from PPG. And you can see here how they attempt to engage their personas at the point of action. On the left-hand side, they're attempting to engage an estimator or a jobber, somebody who's trying to use their product in a particular job. And they're telling them, if you need help estimating, I can help you do that right now, click here. And what's behind that link actually is a reasonably nice treatment of estimating a project. And if we continue to move across there, you can see they're offering case studies. And case studies are offered for distributors or for internal sales to say, hey, this is the product that you want to use to paint your building, to paint your commercial property, let's say. If we continue to move, the next one is aimed at somebody who is in maintenance or in engineering or is going to be specifying the actual tool for the job. And this is where they want to say to you, you need information right now about why we use this paint. Here it is. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we're talking about a completely different audience and a different actor who's got to engage at some point. And this is somebody in procurement. This is somebody who's going to evaluate how I'm going to have a relationship with this company. What are the digital tools going to look like? How do we do this? How does the purchase orders work, and so on and so forth. They're trying to aim at each of these personas at the point they need information, at the point they're going to act. Critically, we don't know which one of these is at the bottom of the funnel, which one of these actors, which one of these personas is ultimately going to say, now we'll buy. So we need to be able to react to each of them as though each of these personas is converting right now in the moment that they want to act. Ultimately, then, we have to make sure that they're satisfied, by the way, with the action we take, with how we treat them. So if we look at this on a spectrum now from left to right, turn the maturity model on its side and say we have marketing to businesses on the left-hand side and marketing to personas all the way on the right, what you'll notice is that as we progress, we move from the point of needing to market to our customers into a point of needing to engage our customers. And when I talk about personas need to be engaged, okay? And those actors, the acting personas, we can only gain by insight. We can't intuit out who they are. We just don't know, and they're not unique. They may be unique by customer. They're not even homogenous, right? So when we talk about engaging those personas, what do we have to do? We have to figure out who they are. We have to nurture the relationships with them. We have to do things like target content at them, target products at them, give them relevant functionality, give them relevant data, give them relevant points to act. And these are all things that we talk about in a B2C journey. We're going to learn how to do those in B2B. So first and foremost, how do we figure out who these people are? How do we figure out where we're going to find them? Well, we need to do research. And I can't emphasize enough, we've got to start this process with research. We don't have the intuition to get us here. And our research begins, at Paragon, our research begins with knowing what you know. When we engage you to work with you on a project like this, we have to understand what your organization knows already, because you do have this information. It may not be collected, it may not be codified, but you do have this information. And so we're going to use techniques like listening into your sales calls, joining your sales staff in some of their preparation and presentation, interviewing the frontline staff, the people who are actually hearing from customers, what they're saying, looking at the feedback that comes back from them, and conducting workshops to make sure that we socialize this among all the parties. A critical step to make sure we know what you already know. And then we have to know how your customers are reacting to it, right? Ultimately, we're going to want to empathize with them. And we're going to do this through a number of techniques like customer interviews, right? We do a lot of customer interviews. We actually sit down and talk to your customers. And that gives us a ton of information to understand, what they observe and whether they think the tools they're using are usable, whether they think the tools are there when they need them, whether they think that they can get at what they need. It's ultimately all rolled up into the voice of that customer, the feedback we get from them. Usually we can just talk to them. Sometimes we actually have to organize them into specific focus groups to get to the bottom of this. And then ultimately, once we have that research done, we need to build these tools to enable us to use them. So let's talk about those tools going forward. What does that mean? So the first thing we have to do is once we've done our learning, once we've done our research, we have to figure out who these personas are. And identifying and documenting a persona in a B2B space is a really tricky exercise. Okay? They're going to look like B2C personas when we're done. But B2B gives us a number of challenges. Number one, because our buyers will engage with us in different, unique ways, because the engineer is sometimes the project manager, because the procurement person is sometimes making the buying decision, because the project manager sometimes has more influence than usual, right? We have to be careful not to boil our personas down to a completely homogeneous look at an audience. If we do that, we've unwound the entire point of a persona. We need to know what makes these people tick. And the entire audience doesn't tick the same way. So on one hand, we have the risk of building these homogeneous personas that aren't useful to us. On the other side, we have the risk, because a B2B business is so engaged with your customers, especially your biggest ones, and your sales team is so engaged, and your account managers are so engaged, we get a lot of very specific feedback from specific people, from specific customers. And we have to be careful not to build personas that look too much like one of them, because what we can do is we can overreact to Judy, who works for Acme Company, that is always having a problem finding the product spec sheet for what she needs, right? We could very easily write that into a persona when we don't know that to be the case overall. So we have to be really careful that our personas hit the sweet spot between not being too homogenous on one side and not being too reactive to a loud customer on the other side. So once we get those personas right, what do we do with them? Well, once we get them right, we have to look to build a journey map. And a journey map is specifically the buying journey that we expect these personas to go through, where we expect them to start and where we expect them to end. And we've got to be really careful, even just in identifying those start and end points, because sometimes we expect them to start at the point where they first click a mouse or the point where they first press a button. But sometimes they expect to start at the point where they first think they need us, way back here. And maybe there's something we could have done to enable that early interaction. So we have to understand the start and the end of that process. And then ultimately we have to map out what they're doing at points in that process. What do we think generally this persona needs? We may not know the sequence it happens in. We may not know which one's the one at the bottom of the funnel. We may not know how this all comes through. But we need to identify what they're doing and then attempt to capture what those touch points are wherever it happens in the process, right? Identify where there's pain points for them. Identify where they might abandon if we can't give them what they need. Identify how we can remove friction. Identify where we can differentiate. And ultimately, try and make sure that we're ready to respond to that journey that they want to take. Whatever portion of the overall B2B buying journey that is, it's the journey for this persona. We're going to map those and then we're going to put them all together. Critically, as we do it, we also want to focus on how the B2B buyer is feeling during this process. And this is one of the lessons we can take away from B2C. In B2C, we often talk about how our buyers are feeling. In B2B, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are ultimately dealing with people, and people do have feelings and do sometimes act emotionally. Okay, with our journey map in hand, the next thing we want to do is take a look at what we call a vision roadmap. And a vision roadmap is really our North Star for the optimal buying experience. What is it that if everything works the way we expect it to, what is it that everybody's doing and what is the experience they have as they go through engaging with our company? And really this illustrates that overall vision from an ideal state, knowing that we'll almost never run an ideal state. It sets that ideal state so we can get alignment from everybody internally and say, here's how we expect this to work. We know it's going to deviate all over the place. We even know we're going to revise this eventually, but this is how we expect it to work. And then ultimately, with that roadmap in place, with the vision in place, we can break that ideal state down into steps, into components, things that we can do and consume and actually release. So we can fix this part of the journey and then this part of the journey and then this part of the journey as we go. Okay? Ultimately, we culminate all of this with what we call an engagement plan. So the engagement plan follows that journey map, right? And it looks to engage these personas around what we call moments that matter. The points where we know they're going to act, the points where we know there may be friction, the points where that particular persona is going to value the interaction we're giving them, okay? And if we can do this correctly, we're going to make sure that we can get the right message to the right persona at the right time, on their timeline, not ours, at the right time, so that they can buy from us. Okay, so research done, planning done in hand. How do we activate this? What do we do with technology now to make this thing work, to change the experience? Okay, so the first point of activation I want to talk about is personalization. And I can tell you personalization, even though it gets talked about a lot in B2B, is chronically underused. We don't see nearly enough personalization used in B2B digital channels. And part of the reason for this, I think, is that the projects tend to get a little bit stalled because B2B personalization has different goals than B2C personalization. And often as customers try to map the B2C personalization that they experience in a consumer goods site or at Amazon, let's say, that they experience themselves, they try to map that into their B2B business and they get twisted. There's no good way to do it. And it's because the goals are different, right? When we talk about B2C personalization, we often talk about seeing things that are related. And in B2B, we want to talk about things that are relevant, for example. In B2C, we talk about things that are impulse, things that we could do right now. In B2B, we want to talk about things that are timely instead. What do we need right now? Sometimes in B2C, we're talking about discount. In B2B, we're often talking about value, and so forth. We need to reorganize or realign what we think about personalization into the B2B world, okay? And then we need to focus on delivering personalized content as opposed to personalized products. Often we see B2B personalization projects get derailed at the point of saying, okay, the customer has bought this, they have a cart that looks like this, what else can I show them? What else can I sell them? And that's really not the point, right? We need to make sure that we have an actor, and we can't do that precisely enough to make that work, right? What we need to do instead is make sure they have the information they need to continue to drive themselves down whatever portion of the funnel they're working in. Okay? Ultimately, what we're trying to do here is help our personas act. We're helping them take the next step in whatever the journey is that they're trying to take. Second step of activation, relationship building. And really, this is just an account-based marketing extension of personalization. What we're trying to do here is still personalize to that particular persona, to that particular buyer, except that this time, it's a real person. We've built a digital profile on this person, and we're using it to actually message what we know is the next step in our relationship, or what we think is the next step in building a relationship with them. And if that's not the next step, we can look at the data, we can look at what they do, and we can start to change the way we react to that type of profile. It's wickedly effective, very, very useful in B2B, and it's useful across many channels. The website is one place where we can use a relationship building personalization techniques. But we also see it in email, we see it in chat, voice, even VRU units and call centers, all the way down to enabling our sales team with these types of strategies. Third point of activation that we see all the time is the need to adapt our processes to what the buyer expects. Very, very often, what we'll find from the research activities that we talked about earlier is that the tools work a certain way because our internal process works a certain way. And sometimes we need to change that process so that the tools will enhance the journey, not disrupt it because we want it to work a certain way. We need to make sure that the applications we have, the technology and tools we have match the buyer's process and the buyer's expectations. Are we mobile where we need to be mobile? Are we on voice if we need to be on voice? Right? Can the customer get support when they expect it? Can the customer get answers when they need them? Where is there friction? What's inhibiting this sale? And how can we make it better? And a lot of times we can make it better by changing the way we engage behind the tools in order to make an easier, more straightforward tool presentation and ultimately make an easier, more straightforward buying journey for that buyer. Finally, there's a few other features that we want to talk about activating correctly when we're in a B2B space. The one that I see the most often that is done incorrectly is that we have to make sure customers can find products. A lot of my customers, a lot of you deal with catalogs that are thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of SKUs in size. And so often we'll see customers rely on having a good information architecture, a good breakdown of products. And they'll expect the customer to drill down through 6, 7, 8 levels of categorization to ultimately find the product they need or the type of product they need. We don't want to lose sight in a B2B space of how important search actually is. We talked earlier about the fact that we are selling to people, and people are used to using search and used to using search that works really well, and they see it in all their B2C channels. Ultimately, oftentimes when we do metrics on customer sites that have been somewhat neglected, we'll find that they expect customers are digging through an IA, through a set of facets to refine what they're looking for. But in fact, the customer is furiously trying different search terms to get to what they're looking for, right? And we're talking both external search and on-site search. We have to make sure we get that right. We can't just rely on an internally focused grouping of products to hope that the customer gets to where they're supposed to get, or internally focused group of content as well. We need to make sure also in B2B that we're looking at the correct channels. Do we understand what our primary channels are? Are we mobile where we need to be mobile? Are we looking at IoT if we need to activate that? Are we looking at chat and voice in certain places? Are we sure that we're addressing customers where and when they expect to find us? And that's a question I can't answer for you right now in this presentation, but it's something that we would do as part of an engagement, or I'd encourage you to do as part of your team. Are we in the right places? I would also encourage you to look hard at how you reuse content. We often see customers reusing global content in local markets. And even though the language is correct, English content, the message can sometimes be horribly wrong. We use products in different areas in different ways. So I want you to look and make sure that the content you've got, if it's not local, it's probably not useful. And you can measure those things, but measure it and confirm that, and then move to more local content. Finally, one we see a lot reflected into B2B space is the idea of ratings and reviews. Sometimes this is because it comes with the tooling the customer's using. Sometimes it's because it's an intuitive thing to use from the B2C space. What we found is that ratings and reviews don't tend to work as well as they could because buyers don't view them as credible. They certainly don't view them as extensive enough. There's not enough of a body of ratings and reviews on your own site to really inform that buyer's opinion. But we found that testimonials are. So sometimes we can take a small shift like that from something that's presented as a rating or a review, move it over to something presented as a testimonial, and actually get the intended output out of it. All right, that's about all the time we have today. So before I finish, I want to leave you with a few takeaways. Number one, I want you to come out of this session today and recognize that the B2B buying journey and the personas you're dealing with are different from how consumers buy. Number two, I want you to recognize that your business needs to move beyond marketing to other businesses, the way we talked about earlier, and get all the way to the point of identifying and engaging personas. Number three, in order to get there, we have to perform research. We can't guess about our buyers. We don't have enough intuition. No matter how many years we've been at the company, we don't have enough intuition to develop this in a vacuum. Number four, once we've done the research, make sure that we're mapping the buyer's journeys, that we're writing down, that we're capturing exactly what we've learned so that we can roadmap out and respond to the things we learned from our research. Number five, activate the supporting features in your digital channels. Your customer expects technology. They expect top-end technology that's on par with how they experience the rest of the internet. We need to be there. We need to do personalization. We need to make sure we're building relationships, we're engaging people along the way, that we're modifying our processes if we have to make sure the tools are correct for the customer. Number six, as we do this, make sure we're collecting data about how customers are behaving, and make sure we're collecting incremental data as we change things so that we can analyze that behavior, so we can feedback and ultimately evolve the properties we put together, the tools we have, and the way we do business. That's all I have today. Thank you very much. Again, my name is John Hours from Paragon. You can see my contact information on the screen if you have any questions or want to discuss further. Thank you very much.